This episode of Simple Civics Greenville County is brought to you by Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, providing free books to children 0 to 5 throughout Greenville County. To sign up, visit greenvillefirststeps.org/freebooks. That's greenvillefirststeps.org/freebooks.
Over the past 25 years, Hollingsworth Funds has invested $140 million in grants to more than 220 nonprofit organizations, out of what is now a $415 million asset base. All of this was made possible by the land holdings, innovation, and legacy of Mr. John D. Hollingsworth, an inventor, a textile fiber equipment manufacturer, and a real estate investor who left the entirety of his $275 million estate to create Hollingsworth Funds upon his death in 2000. I'm Katie Smith with Greater Good Greenville, and on this episode of Simple Civics Greenville County, I talk with Gage Weekes, President and CEO of Hollingsworth Funds, about Mr. Hollingsworth and the Hollingsworth Funds history and what's next for Hollingsworth Funds, which is also what's next for Greenville. If you visited the shops at Greenridge or the Millennium Campus, or if you have a student at Beck, Thomas E. Kearns Elementary, or Penny Fisher Middle, you have stepped on the land that is his legacy, with much more community development to come. In our conversation, Gage mentions many interesting studies, projects, and resources, and we'll link all of them in the show notes, along with more information about Hollingsworth Funds and this special anniversary. I am excited to celebrate an important anniversary in Greenville County's history today with President and CEO of Hollingsworth Funds, Gage Weekes.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Katie.
Thanks for being here. Some of us who are in the nonprofit sector and the philanthropic sector know Hollingsworth Funds really well, but for listeners who don't, give us some stats to kind of give an overview of what Hollingsworth Funds is and has done.
Yeah, sure. So Hollingsworth Funds started with $275 million in assets, but today we're over $415 million in assets, 300 of which is in a traditional endowment, kind of a liquid endowment, and then the remaining $115 million is in the cost basis of our remaining real estate. And over the last 25 years, we've taken what was essentially an illiquid asset because we were gifted a lot of land and a textile machinery plant at our birth, and turn that into a large endowment from which we can make grants into the community. And so since inception, we've made more than $140 million worth of grants into the Greenville community. Our first year in 2001, I think, was about $415,000 in grants, and just recently approved this year about $12.5 million. So it's been significant growth over the last 25 years, something we're really excited about.
It's amazing impact, and it's been fun to see it since the beginning. So all of this has happened since John Hollingsworth's death 25 years ago, but in his life, he had a big impact as well. Tell us about him and stories that listeners might want to know.
Yeah, he was definitely a unique individual, a really special individual. He was born in Atlanta in 1917 and moved shortly thereafter at a young age to Greenville. He started working for his father's textile machinery plant called John D. Hollingsworth on Wheels. The first machine shop was actually on Oregon Street, right off of Augusta Road, which a lot of people don't know. And in 1942, he took over his father's business, and that's when I moved it out to the plant site on Lawrence Road. Started out as a small shop out there, and then grew from there. He was an inventor. A lot of people refer to him as kind of a mechanical or electrical genius, and so he basically revolutionized the textile machinery business. He invented a metallic card clothing process that separated fibers 10 times faster than anybody else, and built machinery that was used around the world. So, between starting this off in 1942, by the time he was into the late 70s, into the 80s in his heyday, they had over 5,000 employees with a presence in 18 different countries, all of which started right here in little Greenville.
Well, I'm sure it's been so interesting to hear stories from his former colleagues and employees as you've begun this process of celebrating the legacy that he's left over the last 25 years. What are you hearing from people about what they remember about him?
A lot of people hear about the stories about him being a private individual and almost eccentric in a way. But the reality is, he was just a guy who was really dedicated to his business. That was a plant that operated on 3 shifts, and he was there all the time. And so he just had a tremendous work ethic, was always on the shop floor. I was just talking to Bill Henderson, who was the longtime president of Hollingsworth on Wheels, 60 plus years at the company. And he was just telling stories about how Mr. Hollingsworth used to walk the floor, even in the third shift in the middle of the night, always curious about what people were working on, how they could improve. So a lot of that kind of private nature was just actually a lot about the dedication that he had to the business. But a lot of people also don't realize how just quietly generous he was. He was a really thoughtful individual who cared not only about his employees, but his customers, and also the community that he was in. We were sitting actually at a lunch the other day with a nonprofit leader. She and I were talking about the 25th with Hollingsworth Funds. And she said, my father actually used to drive a truck for Mr. Hollingsworth for 30 plus years. And a lot of people don't realize that Hollingsworth on Wheels actually was one of the largest trucking businesses as well, because they were constantly moving all the textile machinery around to customers, and they had a big service side of that where they would go and replace parts and fix machines and things like that. But she was talking about a memory that was very vivid for her of sitting on Santa's lap at a annual Christmas party and getting toys or things like that. But she talked about how much her father enjoyed working for Hollingsworth on Wheels and for Mr. Hollingsworth, and that he was a 30-year plus employee. And so many of the employees there were 20, 30, 40 years there. So I think that says a lot about him as well. But he was also just generous personally. He would have employees that, maybe they had a family member that got sick or needed a surgery somewhere that was maybe outside of the region. And he would actually use the fleet of planes that he had to fly people to, a hospital and have something done. And his only stipulation that was nobody tell them that it was him that was doing that. So, very humble, again, very private, quietly generous. And he'd do that for a lot of just supporting a lot of organizations throughout the community anonymously. Obviously, people didn't have a good sense for where some of those gifts came from. And that was really important to him. So,
wow, that is fascinating. So he passes away on December 30th, 2000. And he had made some very sophisticated arrangements regarding his estate that set in motion this incredible legacy that has happened since. So would love to know more about Hollingsworth Funds itself, how it came to be, and some of the milestones that you've passed over the last 25 years.
Yeah, so the important thing that Mr. Hollingsworth wanted to have happen upon his death, which he thought about for a long time, was to ensure that the textile machinery plant was in operation the minute following. So the way Hollingsworth Funds was created, it was actually created as a Type 1 supporting organization, which is a slightly unique nonprofit designation that allows not only an operating business like the textile machinery plant to roll up into a charitable entity, but also over 42,000 acres of land that he amassed over time, because what he didn't put back into his textile machinery plant, he invested into real estate across the state of South Carolina. So those 42,000 acres were across the state, 2/3 of which were down in the Low Country, and then about 1/3 of it here in Greenville. But he established Hollingsworth Funds with those assets. So Hollingsworth Funds gets established in 2001 as a Type 1 supporting organization. That means that it has named beneficiaries, and those beneficiaries actually appoint the majority of our board slots. And so that's why Furman University receives 45% of our annual contributions. The YMCA of Greenville County receives 10% of our annual contributions. And then 45% goes to a class of organizations really designated as any 501c3 benefiting Greenville County. And he went to Furman University for a brief stint, less than a year, but still had fond memories of his time there. And he was a big fan of the Y. He used to show up at 5 o'clock in the morning before anybody was there to work out and then get his day started. So that's why the Y came to be there. But early on, the unique nature of our start was that we were almost 100% illiquid, which is very different from a traditional foundation. So 42,000 acres that were gifted into Hollingsworth Funds, and the textile machinery plant, which by that time, was on the decline. Really we had zero liquid of those 275 million, in assets that they were valued at the time. So I would say really the first 10 years of our existence was really about the board, which was a volunteer board at the time that we had no real staff, for many of those kind of early years, certainly from the philanthropy side, was really to divest of a lot of that real estate in order to raise money for the endowment and then to be able to pay out grants. And so I think whether it's a milestone or just a really interesting impact that Hollingsworth Funds had in its first decade was just the land that it sold or developed turned into a lot of things that maybe we take for granted today, right? So if you've ever been to the shops at Greenridge, or you've been to the Whole Foods across the street on Woodruff Road, or if you have driven through Millennium Campus, where iCar is, or you send your kid to Penny Fisher Middle, or to Beck Middle for that matter, or Kearns Elementary, all of those places are sitting on Hollingsworth Funds land. Even in Lawrence County, the ZF transmissions plant on Hollingsworth Funds land. So that was a pretty cool story that after divesting of some of that, there's just a real contribution to the economic and educational vitality of our community. Today, we have roughly 2,500 acres of that 42,000 that still remains, but it's some of the most valuable land. So when you think about the 1,100 acre master plan development in Verde, about half of that is still developable and will kind of contribute to our growth. In addition to the financial aspect of it, it just gives us an opportunity to think about the creation of place a little bit differently, and think about that a little bit more through the eyes of our philanthropic interests and how we can contribute to Greenville's growth in a smarter, more inclusive way, where we've got an opportunity for everybody to have a chance to get ahead and to be able to utilize both the power of the endowment and the investments that we can make into the community, as well as the real estate that we have. I think that's a pretty cool thing, pretty unique.
Tell us about some of the milestones that have happened along the way in this journey.
I think one of the, whether we think about it as a milestone or a seminal moment, I think, certainly in the 2010, 11, 12, that's when Hollingsworth Funds first started to really ramp up on engaging in kind of professional staff and thinking about its, not only its real estate, but also its philanthropy in a more intentional way. And then I think you have a real kind of seminal moment in 2013, 2014, where two things happened. One, Dr. Raj Chetty came out with a really important piece of research around economic mobility and how people get ahead in our country. It really put a spotlight on not only the Southeast, but Greenville in particular, that even though we were in the middle of tremendous growth, it was clear that we were actually one of the hardest places in the country to get ahead for people who were born in the bottom quintile of household income to find their way to the top. And that was a really important moment for us, because I think it gave us almost kind of a North Star in its own way of how to frame up some of our philanthropic interests and how we could support the Greenville community, both in getting kids prepared for college and career, attaining a post-secondary degree, getting on a pathway to a living wage job, but also thinking about some of the growth challenges that face Greenville, whether we're talking about affordable housing pressure, transportation and connectivity, even childcare at this stage in the game. But the other thing that happened right about that same time was a speech that was given by Ambassador James Joseph, who was the ambassador to South Africa, who gave a speech at a community foundations conference about the importance of foundations using all forms of its philanthropic capital. So we refer to it as SMURF, which many people hear us talk about all the time, but what that really stands for is social, moral, intellectual, reputational, and financial capital. So it's not just about the grant making, right? That's important. That helps support a lot of the things that we do. But I would say that probably 95% of the work that we do is in those other areas. It's about leveraging the relationships that we have to help convene and bring folks together to solve problems more collectively. It's about some of the moral, reputational capital that we use to just educate and, make folks aware of challenges that face our community, solutions that are out there, raising a hand when others, maybe aren't, to say, hey, I think there's something we can do a little bit better here, or even thinking about some of just the intellectual capital, either that we generate internally from a foundation perspective, or that exists within our community but doesn't necessarily make its way to a lot of decision makers, and trying to find ways to do that. So those two moments with Dr. Chetty and with Ambassador James Joseph really kind of defined both the North Star for where we wanted to go at the time, and also a little bit of a roadmap of how we could get there, what role we could play, which I thought was really kind of created an identity for us over the last 25 years.
Yeah, I agree and see it in the way you show up. And really, listeners, if you are not embedded in the world of philanthropy, particularly through foundations and institutions like that, I would like to think it's the way a lot of you probably practice your own philanthropy. You give a donation somewhere, but hopefully you're also volunteering or speaking up for the issues surrounding it and putting your whole self into that giving. That is what Gage is talking about with social, moral, intellectual, reputational capital. It's kind of not just writing a check and saying, good luck to you. It's really putting the whole heft of the institution behind that gift. And I've really appreciated that. It is amazing to see all of the trees that are growing now because of little acorns you guys planted. Exciting.
Well, I'll share one fun story from Mr. Hollingsworth days that relates to trees as well. The story of the green curtain, which many people don't realize or know about. But when he first started the textile machinery plant on Lawrence Road, it was pretty wide open around it, not a lot of trees. And being a private individual that he was, more so because of his inventions and just not wanting people to steal his ideas or be peeking in the windows, he started planting pine trees. And he planted pine trees basically in concentric circles all around that plant. When you think about all the pine trees that exist from that side of Lawrence Road across from Century BMW, for those of you who know where that is, all the way back towards into Verde, all of those pine trees were planted by Mr. Hollingsworth. As he acquired land, he would plant more pine trees, really to kind of protect his asset. And there's a great picture in the lobby of our office of one of his plants in Brazil that he purchased. And if you look at it, you will see the exact same thing. He planted pine trees in concentric circles all around that plant. But what that did in Greenville, as it relates to our real estate and how it's impacted our growth today, is that it kind of created, he didn't want anybody to develop, that land. His idea was to hold it in perpetuity, but it kind of created a sort of the hole in the donut in the city, if you will, between Woodruff Road and Lawrence Road and everything, sort of west of I-85, kind of where Verde is today. And so, in some ways, that foresight has helped preserve and even create some of the value that we have today along Lawrence Road, and that we can look forward to from a real estate development perspective. Because as we think about what's on the horizon for the next 25 years of Hollingsworth Funds, certainly staying true to that North Star around increasing economic mobility and keeping, strengthening those pathways for folks to attain a living wage is going to be paramount for us, especially around those collective initiatives, a lot of policy and advocacy work that we do as well. But there's a real opportunity for us to develop the remaining real estate that we have. And many of you may have seen recently an announcement around Bolden Street District, which is going to be a 90-acre kind of next-generation destination for everyone in Greenville. And that's between all the land on Lawrence Road, where a lot of the larger big box retail sits. So where the Michaels is by Haywood Road, all the way up through Marketplace Shopping Center with the Gabes, and Sky Zone at the other end, and then the pad sites next to Big O Dodge. So all the way from Haywood to Big O Dodge, that entire area is going to be redeveloped over the next 10 to 15 years. And our hope is that while certainly, it's important for us to still yield a profit off of that without question, because all the proceeds of that go into supporting our endowment, which then goes back into the community. Also looking for ways to integrate opportunity into the place itself. So if we're going to build residential, how do we integrate affordability and create opportunity for folks? If we're going to build commercial or office, how do we recruit and retain companies that are paying living wages and that are giving opportunities to folks? So thinking about how we can kind of build a place that also creates opportunity for those who may not have otherwise had it, if we were to let the market just kind of do its thing. And so it's an interesting balance. It's a really great challenge, one that we're excited to tackle, and maybe makes us a little unique.
Just to kind of really get people's minds around this, if you live in Greenville County, you're probably very familiar with the area Gage is talking about, driving down Lawrence Road and those big box sites and the empty pads. So you know that area well, probably, but it's hard to get your head around what does that acreage compare to, and imagining then what could go there instead of empty or potentially underutilized big boxes. So contextualize it for folks.
Yeah, the easiest comparison that we can make from a real estate perspective is for those of you who are familiar with the County Square development close to downtown, that's a 30-acre site. And so if you look at that, you drive through there today and look on both sides of the road, that's a huge site, a lot of opportunity and a ton of mixed-use development that's going to go there. So we have a 90-acre site. So that's 3 county squares stacked up next to each other. So when you think about that is a significant amount of land that is within the city limits, is owned by a single landowner, and is owned by a patient landowner that is a charitable entity, and land that once it is transformed benefits a charitable entity that then goes back into the community. And I think that's an extremely rare opportunity that rarely exists in other places just around the country, right? And the reality is that while we have those 90 acres at Bolden Street District, we have another 80 acres on the corner of I-85 and Lawrence Road. So whenever you get off the exit for 276 and Lawrence Road off of I-85, those trees on the corner, we own all of those as well. And so I think that you start to put that into context, and we have not just a 10, 15-year outlook for the 90 acres of Bolden Street, but, push another, 20, 30 years plus for what that could look like, and then other land that we own within Verde. And so what comes with that is, tremendous responsibility. Obviously, we've had it's been a tremendous responsibility to steward the legacy of Mr. Hollingsworth and the assets that he left us 25 years ago. But we think about what those have turned into today and the opportunity with Greenville's growth over the last 20, 25 years and what that now presents for the land that we have. It's just a tremendous opportunity for the future and for the future of Greenville. And I'm really excited about it because I think it's going to be, Greenville's next, great destination, right? Where we are sort of the pathway of growth, for Greenville over the next couple decades. So what a great way to both contribute to place and community at the same time.
I love it. I certainly am celebrating this 25th anniversary of Hollingsworth Funds because I have personally witnessed the enormous impact that you've made, but it's really exciting to think about all that is still ahead. So enormous congratulations to you and your team and the board that's made it all happen. And thanks for being here today.
Happy to do it. Thank you. And thank you for your leadership. We're not the doers in the community. It's people like you and others who are actually getting the work done. We're just trying to set the conditions for it and be a good partner and a good facilitator.
Thanks so much, Gage.
Thanks, Katie.
Hi, Simple Civics Greenville County listeners. Nathaniel here. If you've made it this far, then we think you'll really love our newsletter. Sign up for bonus content, updates, and more right in your inbox. Look for the link in the description that says newsletter to sign up, or visit us at simpleCivicsGreenvilleCounty.org. Find the link in the menu that says newsletter and sign up there. We'll see you again next week.